Hello, everyone. Squirrel back once again with another build crafting video, this time on hunters. Now, my last video was a little scatterbrained, but I think this one might be a little bit more interesting, especially with Arc 3.0 just coming out. Having an Arc video is kind of helpful. So let's just dive in. So, Arc Strider is super important for this, and we are going to be relying on the Assassin's Cowl exotic. Now, for those who aren't entirely sure or don't use it very often, powered melee final blows grant invisibility and restore a portion of health and shields. Finishers and final blows against powerful targets increase the duration of invisibility and the amount of health and shields restored. Super important because for this build, we have we sank recovery all the way into the ground because our goal for health is going to be getting in there and just beating everything down to the ground. So let's dive into the Arc Strider in-depth information for this. Now, uh, no brainer, we're going to be running Gambler's Dodge for this to keep powered melee uptime all the time. Which melee ability you use is up to you. Disorienting Blow does have the benefit of blinding whoever you're hitting and then being able to, dodge blind. Um, I personally am more interested in combination blow for the stacking melee damage that we're going to be looking to get, as well as the fact that combination blow gives you your class ability back right away if you kill something with a melee, and it gives you a little more healing on top of what we're going to be getting from Assassin's Cowl. Grenade is whatever you choose to use. Um, Whatever floats your boat, really, because grenades, while nice, aren't a core focus for this build. As for the aspects, I'm going to be running Flow State and Lethal Current. For my core, I thought about a possible Tempest Strike build with this, but it's what it might end up do if I put Tempest Strike in, the core gameplay would be to Tempest Strike at the very beginning and then focus on probably using Tempest Strike and I would say Lethal Current. Tempest Strike giving the jolt to as many enemies as it hits, and then Lethal Current giving you that blind on melee. But let's go over the aspects again. Flow State, defeating a jolted target makes you amplified, and while you're amplified, dodge recharges more quickly, gives us more DR while dodging, and we get reload speed. Reload speed doesn't really matter as much, but it's nice to have. Lethal Current, after dodging, our next melee has increased range, jolts the target, and creates an aftershock. And then damaging any jolted target with melee attacks will also blind them. So Lethal Current, in and of itself, will give us some of the things that Disorienting Blow gives us. The real benefit to Disorienting Blow is the fact that it gives us amplified just on melee hit. Now then, fragments. Fragments very important for this. The fragments I am running are Spark of Resistance. When surrounded by combatants, you have more DR. Super self-explanatory. Our goal here is to be in melee range as much as possible. Spark of Feedback. Taking melee damage briefly increases our outgoing melee damage. Super important because we're going to be taking a lot of melee damage, and just giving us more buffs to our melee damage is going to feed into the class a bit more. Spark of Volts. Finishers make us amplified, in part because we're also going to be looking to finish some of the more meaty targets to get that health regen. And Spark of Amplitude. Rapidly defeating targets while you are amplified creates an orb of power. Now, Spark of Amplitude isn't as important. This fourth slot is really a personal preference in terms of what you really want to run. If you're running a special weapon that's arc, Spark of Beacons can be really good, especially if it's like a close range fusion rifle, shotgun, glaive, what have you. Um, Spark of Momentum, giving you some melee energy back isn't bad. Uh, and Spark of Ions is also potentially really good here, just for the overall ability energy coming back from an ionic trace. A lot of the others are more for, I feel like, going from encounter to encounter, something like um, Spark of Focus. But I don't, if you have 100 mobility, it's kind of not really as important anymore. Um, Spark of Frequency giving you uh, some weapon reload speed on melee is nice, but Spark of Recharge can also be good. Uh, the higher tier content, Spark of Recharge gains more and more value because your health is going to be in a constant flux state. So having more grenade and melee energy isn't terrible. Especially if you're going the Tempest Strike version of this, I would say Spark of Recharge climbs in importance drastically just because of the increased cooldown on Tempest Strike as a whole. Now that we've gone over the Arc Strider abilities, let's dive into the mods associated with this. All of my armor for this build is Arc, because Arc armor tends to give a lot more, or Arc armor tends to focus way more on melee and offshoots from there. So for the helmet, I'm rocking Powerful Friends. When you become charged with light, nearby allies also become charged with light. Main reason for this mod is plus 20 mobility. It provides a benefit to other people by making them charged with light, but we don't really care about being charged with light with this build at all. And really, we're not doing anything to make us charged with light, which it's just a big stat sink. The two mods I have up here in the head are Harmonic Siphon, just because generating orbs is really nice and pretty self-explanatory, I think. We're going to be for this setup, I'm running Risk Runner just for even more more damage resistance, especially if I'm in an arc raid, which there are quite a few this season. For our gauntlets, we are, we have plenty of room for champion mods as well as seasonal artifact mods, but the big one is Overcharge Wellmaker. Finishing a combatant gives us 2 arc elemental wells, and the elemental wells are important for this build. So keep that in mind. Now, what are we feeding those arc elemental wells into? Well, we're feeding them into Well of Ions. Picking up an arc elemental well causes our next melee to deal increased damage. Super important. For the cloak, I'm rocking a couple of seasonal mods, which are going to go away, and once they go away, having Outreach to reduce melee cooldown when using class ability, it's nice, and might also allow us to, instead of running Gambler's Dodge, run our Reload Dodge. But we have Reactive Pulse here. Don't care about the charged with light portion of this, so we can completely ignore that. The secondary benefit, though, we get a powerful overshield when performing finishers. Super important. We need to make sure we are getting those finishers off whenever we possibly can. Use melees to kill red bar enemies, low health enemies, and then finish elites and other enemies that we won't necessarily want to actually kill with melee and give us that giant overshield. And the overshield with that is pretty potent. Um, and then our final mod for this build, at least in class slot, is Striking Light. Once again, don't really care about the charge with light, as we don't have any way to make ourselves charged with light. However, if we are running with people who have powerful friends or ways of making other people charged with light, we do get some benefit from it, which defeating combatants with melee damage and swords spawns orbs of power for allies. But we also have this mod on primarily for the secondary benefit of damage resistance against combatants while sprinting, which pair that with 10 resilience and damage resistance while sprinting with the speed booster component of amplified. We're going to be running from encounter to encounter, group of enemies to group of enemies, to try and stay in melee 100% of the time. If we are stuck away from enemies or at range, this build has problems, has a lot of problems. That said, we have many ways to get in range, and finishing a target that gets too close with Assassin's Cowl will allow us to close the gap to get in melee range and start popping off. I was inspired to make this video and do this build earlier in the season when I saw a hunter running Assassin's Cowl and staying in melee range the entire final encounter in the Fallen Saber Grandmaster Nightfall. And they were unable to die standing in melee range of the ads, surrounded by ads, just meleeing everything into the ground. And as soon as I saw they were running Assassin's Cowl, I thought there might be something to this, because I hadn't seen any build videos on it quite yet. And then, of course, reduced melee cooldown with picking up orbs of power. It's not really as important. It's more just a filler mod, as a lot these charged with light mods are extremely, extremely costly to throw on. Now, the core mods for this, for me, are going to be Overcharge Wellmaker, Well of Ions, and Finisher or Reactive Pulse. Those are the three mods that I would say you absolutely need for this build. For me personally, Powerful Friends and Striking Light, I think you can make entirely optional. However, I do like the stat cushion that you get from Powerful Friends, and it allows you to trigger the secondary effects of both Reactive Pulse and Powerful Friends if you have that equipped. Striking Light is entirely optional. An additional source of damage reduction is always nice. And ultimately, what you can do is, instead of that, if you really want, you can put Melee Wellmaker. You can run Well of Striking just for more melee energy. Melee Wellmaker, though, would be my preferred pick, just for the fact that just another way of making elemental well mods to further pump out that melee damage. Weapons for this build, anything close range. Anything that's going to pop off at close range. So you've got submachine guns, you've got sidearms for your primary. For energy weapons, you're looking at something like a shotgun. You're looking at a breech-loaded grenade launcher if you want to do blinding nades. Uh, Wither Horde is another good option. I have a sniper just for potential picking off snipers or whatnot before I get into range, just because of their sheer damage output. And then power weapons, 100% looking at swords. Swords are key for this. Uh, Another thing you can do special weapon wise is glaives are going to be huge for this build. Absolutely incredible, especially if you have the hunter exotic glaive with the buffs that received, which I still have yet to get from Wellspring. My luck has not been great for that. But power weapons, you're looking at swords. You can use a heavy machine gun just to try and mow stuff down if you start to get overwhelmed. Or you can just leave your uh, power weapon to be a boss damage weapon. So linear fusion, rocket, um, whisper, if that's your prerogative. But for most content, this is overkill, and you'll be able to breeze through content with just sheer numbers. When you get into higher end content, the smarter you play, the better this this build will really shine. And this is my first hunter build video. Please like, comment whether you like the build, whether you don't. Maybe you want to try it out. Maybe you have comments on ways that this build could be improved. I'm always open to listen to feedback, and I will see you guys in my next build crafting video.